Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started if everyone's ready. We may have some more people trickling in, but it's 12:03, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Williams, Adult and Community Services Manager for the Columbia Public Library. Welcome to our first Zoom event that we're co-hosting with the League of Women Voters. They are pros at this. They've been doing some things over the summer, but we're so pleased to be working with them once again in this new online format. We share a mission with the League to support an informed and engaged community, and we are grateful for this longstanding partnership. A couple of Zoom housekeeping items. If you hover over your Zoom window with your mouse, you should see a chat icon at the bottom. So if you do have a question for our presenter today, you can click on that chat icon and type that in. Also, after the presentation, there'll be just a very quick optional poll that pops up in your browser that'll help the library plan for future programming. We are recording this presentation, so it will be available in the next day or two on the League's YouTube channel, as well as the library's for future viewing. And now I will turn things over to Marilyn McLeod, who is president of the League of Women Voters of Columbia-Boone County.
Good afternoon, and thank all of you for attending. We are really pleased to be working again with the library on these programs. This is a monthly series of topics that we feel are of interest to the community and to engage and inform our fellow citizens. This is just one of many, and when at the conclusion of the program today, I'll add some information about upcoming events that we will be working together on. Now I'd like to introduce Barbara Hoppy, who will be the moderator for our program today.
Thank you, Marilyn. Today's program, Lunch and Learn program, is the Community Bail Fund, Why Bail Keeps Poor People in Jail. And before I introduce Peggy Placer, our guest speakers from Race Matters Friends, I wanted to mention that our next program is Lunch and Learn program is October 13th, Tuesday. And Brianna Lennon, our Boone County clerk, will be speaking about the November election process. So I hope everyone can join us next month also. With that, I'd like to introduce Peggy Placer, our guest speaker. Peggy has lived in Columbia, Missouri for 30 years, and she came here to teach at the College of Education at MU. She became involved in the League of Women Voters while still at MU, and was on the board for several years, and ultimately became a board co-president for 2 years. After she retired from MU, she joined Race Matters Friends and worked to promote and implement community-orienting policing. Her interest in the criminal justice system led to her involvement with the Race Matters Friends Bail Fund about 3 years ago. So with that, I want to thank Peggy for being our guest speaker today, and give the floor to Peggy. And again, remember that you can put questions into chat, and we may be able to take some burning questions during the program, and then certainly at the end of the program. So thank you, Peggy, for being here.
Thank you very much. For much of this talk, I will be sharing my screen so that you'll be able to see a PowerPoint. I'm going to start doing that now, and hope that it works. And can everybody see that, I hope? All right.
Yes, we can see it.
Good. I've titled this Race Matters Friends Community Bail Fund, working to transform criminal justice in Boone County, because we do more than just bail people out. And I won't have time to mention much of that, but I hope people will want to know about some of our other activities. Okay, here's an overview. Whoops, wow, woo, I'm going too fast. an overview of what I'll be talking about. What is bail? What is a bail bond? How does the bail system work? Bail funds, bail reform in Missouri, how our bail fund works, volunteering, and a larger vision of criminal justice at the end, and also how to reach us. What is bail? If you haven't had any contact with the jail system, the court system, not been arrested and taken to the jail, you might not know. Bail is money paid to release a pretrial detainee from jail. A pretrial detainee has not been convicted of anything, only charged. And they've been charged with something when they've been arrested and taken to the jail and detained. A lot of people don't know that 95% of the people in the Boone County Jail are pretrial detainees. That is, they have not been convicted of anything. They haven't even gone to trial yet. They haven't even seen, might not even have a lawyer yet or any of those things. So we prefer the term pretrial detainee. Bail is determined in Boone County. There's a set of a schedule, they call it, of charges from the least serious to the most serious. And most people will be familiar with that the bail for, say, a traffic offense is not going to be as high as the bail for a charge of homicide. So at the first appearance before a judge, the judges may change that preset bail or even waive it based on recommendations of a bail bond investigation by a branch of the courts called the Adult Court Services, or based on recommendations from prosecutors or defense attorneys, or the judge's own decision that the detainee poses no threat to public safety, and it will be okay to release them on their own recognizance, as they call it. People often confuse bail and bond, and they're even used interchangeably in the system, so that I'm not surprised people are confused. We try to be very clear that we're a bail fund, or some people call it cash bail. That is where the detainee or their representative or family member pay the full bail amount that's been set based on the schedule, and we can say the person has been bailed out. The bail is refunded by mail once the case is adjudicated or completed. If the person is convicted, fines, fees, or costs might be deducted from that refund. A bond, on the other hand, is where the defendant relies on a bail bond company to vouch for them in exchange for a percentage of bail, usually 10%. That means the person has bonded out. There are many companies, bail bond companies, who do this. People do not receive a refund of the fee paid to the bail bond company. But as I'll explain a little while, the bail bond company is taking on a risk that the person will or will not return to court or appear in court. So whether you're bailed out or you're bonded out, the court sets conditions for you to remain free of jail. And those things could be like not contacting an alleged victim, which makes sense. Not being in a certain location that was involved in the charge, not using drugs, not carrying a firearm, etc. The violation of those conditions of freedom can lead to rearrest. So they're pretty serious. People are given those conditions when they're released. Forfeiture is something we have to deal with. With bail, which is what we pay, a person's failure to appear in court or violating those conditions that were set means that we lose our entire bail, or the defendant or whoever has paid the bail will lose that money. The defendant will be issued a warrant and put back in jail with a new bail for what they call failure to appear, or FTA. This is why the bail fund tries very hard to get the people we bail out to help them get to court, because we do not want to forfeit. I think the bail bond companies have the same concern, because failure to appear or violating those conditions means, and going back to jail means, the bonding agent will have to pay the entire bail. So if they've, say, bailed somebody out for $500 on a $5,000 bail, they would owe the court the rest of that amount. That would be a forfeiture. And so we and they would have to go to court to a forfeiture hearing to make the case why or why not we should have to forfeit. People ask, what's wrong with cash bail? Shouldn't people who've been charged with doing things have to pay to get out or be detained in jail? We argue that it causes an unjust hardship for people who cannot afford to pay. They can't afford to pay a bail bond company. They can't afford to pay the total bail. So for obvious reasons, it's going to disproportionately affect poor people and disproportionately affects people of color. We have to always remember the accused have not been convicted of a crime. They are being punished, though, before trial through their detention. And you can imagine how that might feel. Also, being in jail is a stigma. People assume that people in jail are guilty. When the people in jail come to court, they haven't been coming in person recently with the pandemic, but they have in the past come to the courthouse for court, and they have to come in shackles and those striped jail outfits. Obviously, people viewing that, the public who are in the courtroom, see them as, well, they're criminals. You know, they have that stigma. People who can pay their bail or bond out, they spend little time in jail. They might not even be booked into the jail, and they're free to live their lives in the community until trial. So a lot of people might not even know they've ever been arrested and bailed out or bonded out. Bail fund projects like our project have sprung up all around the country in the past few years. The best known perhaps is the Bail Project. It's now operating in cities including St. Louis. They have lots of information on their website about bail and how it works and why they oppose bail. They are privately funded by a large endowment or donation of some kind. So they can pay very high amounts of bail. We were founded in 2018. We're part of a network of bail funds, often smaller bail funds, some large, and we're part of the National Bail Fund Network. They also have a lot of information on their website if you're interested in following up. So bail projects, bail funds serve, and they also advocate. We don't want to be considered to be a charity. We also act to advocate for change. We try to de-incarcerate or decarcerate, some people call it, pretrial detainees as a matter of simple justice for people who are poor, who can't afford to get out. We also save tax dollars. A while back, we calculated how many tax dollars we had saved the county by reducing the jail population. We didn't make a huge dent in it, but we did. It added up over the time we've been in operation. And we also do research and develop alternatives or replacements for bail and jail. So we have committees working on that, and that's very important. Bail funds really diverge. I mentioned the Bail Project. They have a lot of funding. The Minnesota Freedom Fund has, in Minneapolis, has a huge amount of funding. We are on the small side. We're one of the smaller ones in the country. Criteria, based on that low budget that we have, we can only pay low bails, and we limit ourselves to Boone County residents because our donors are local. We want to help local people. And then staffing. Some big bail funds have staff and offices to handle some of their administrative things. We're all volunteers, so a retired person like me can take time to do some of that work. But we also have volunteers who work and they do meetings and research and bailing people out at the end of a workday. I want to mention bail reform in Missouri because a lot of people might have heard, or at least last year when it happened, they might have heard if their ears were perked up by this. 2019, the Missouri Supreme Court ordered some changes to the bail system. They were aware of some of the inequities. They issued a Supreme Court order that would affect all courts in the state, and also law enforcement, that they wanted law enforcement to give summons, like a ticket, for minor charges, rather than taking people to jail. So you get a ticket. On that ticket or summons, it says, here's your court date. You should appear on this court date. So that was supposed to unclog the jails because those people would just be free until their court date, go in, and there wouldn't be any need to bail them out. In fact, one of the Supreme Court justices told us there won't be any need for bail funds once this goes into effect. Well, that really didn't happen. They also ordered local judges to release people who did not pose a risk to the community, a danger to the community, to release them on their own recognizance if possible. So there were other provisions, but those were the big ones. And this was supposed to reduce the jail populations and bail bonds, because obviously if people were released by judges for free, there was no need to pay the bail, or if they had never been taken to jail in the first place. It has not made a huge difference, at least in the Boone County jail population. And the reason why that is we had a change in the people we bailed out. Many of the people we now are bailing out they got that summons and they failed to appear for the date on the summons. They didn't realize that not appearing on that date would land them back in jail. So we often bail people out who have failed to appear, and we have to give them a pretty firm message that this is your next court date, please do appear. There are various reasons why somebody wouldn't appear. In the pandemic period especially, sometimes people have to go to work. They don't want to take off work to go to court, or their children are at home, not in school, or some other reason, or they've prioritized other things. And some people, especially some of our homeless clients, just forget. to go. They don't have a strong sense, and we'll have a difficulty reaching them. They don't have a strong sense of, the process. So I can answer more questions in the chat about that if you want to. That court order was a long document. So how we work day to day, detainees call us from the jail. We have a web-based phone line that different volunteers can sign into. We decide, once we've got the information about the person in the jail, if they fit our criteria. And our criteria are $2,000 total bail. That is not very high. That's our upper limit. So these are going to be almost entirely misdemeanors, our lower level charges. We also, as I mentioned before, just bail out Boone County residents with Boone County charges, because we do try to stay in contact with people and we try to help people get to court if we can. So we're working almost entirely out of the Boone County courthouse. Once in a while, we will have somebody who's in another court in Boone County, like Centralia or someplace like that. If we decide, hey, this person really fits our criteria, we round up a volunteer who's going to be the bailout volunteer. They get the money and the forms that we need. And lately, masks go to the jail and pay the bail and offer the person a ride once they come out. We get their contact information and we ask them to assign the bail to us. We have a form they sign saying, once my case is entire, well, it doesn't say it that informally, but once it's in legalese, but once the case is completed, the bail refund will go to the bail fund. So we do have an incentive to stay in touch and remind people of court dates so that we don't forfeit our bail money. So people ask, how is this sustainable? And that is a great question. We thought it would be easier than it is when we first started. Once a trial is concluded, the bail is partially refunded to us. But if our client has been convicted, fines and fees that they owed will be deducted from the refund. We've even had someone whose past due taxes were deducted from the bail refund, which we had not noticed. But the government, once that money is on account, does have the legal right to use that for those payments. So we thought we would get most of the money back and then it would revolve. We were called a revolving bail fund, but it doesn't happen that quickly. We still have a client that we bailed out last April. I'm not talking about April 2020. I'm talking about April 2019, whose case is still not completed. So we have not received a refund for that person. If some people fail to appear, we forfeit. So we do lose funds. People leave town once they're out. And so we do forfeit. And we need a constant flow of donations and have to explain to people who donate, it isn't, we're going to have to keep asking for donations because of the losses that we take in the system. We also have to emphasize the volunteer nature of our work. We are all volunteer. Volunteers answer the phones. They go to the jail. They follow up, make follow-up phone calls or emails, or try to find people on Facebook. All our volunteers receive training, and we have people on hand to answer questions if they encounter any problems. We want people to be reliable, obviously, and also cross-culturally competent, because you can't be working with people, you work with people from who are poor, maybe without shelter, maybe of a different race or cultural background than yourself, and you need to be comfortable with that. And dare I say, even loving about that. And I mean that seriously, to greet somebody as a person equal to yourself when you do meet them, and try to engage them as a person. Our volunteers, though, if they don't want to get involved in this bail project or bail process, they also work on other projects. We have people working on fundraising, which is tough right now because everything's online. We used to have events, but haven't done any events for a while. We are doing a data analysis of data from the jail to see what's going on there, who's brought in, for what's the level of bail, that kind of thing. And we have a committee working on alternatives to cash bail, which is very important. So volunteers don't have to get involved in the everyday nitty-gritty of, that's a very outdated slang, nitty-gritty, but they don't have to get involved in that. The bigger picture, we don't want to be just perpetuating ourselves, because bail is part of our current criminal justice system. And we could just adapt ourselves to that and bail people out in perpetuity. But we also want to have a different kind of society that is also would be safer for everyone in the community. We know that community safety, studies of communities that have higher levels of community safety are often those that have more social services, more educational opportunities, job opportunities, safe housing, safe neighborhoods. So it's in our interest to work toward that day, that long-term picture. So the way we connected up with our work is that we have a critique of the criminal justice system and how it disproportionately affects people of color at all phases, from arrest, even the traffic stops are disproportionate. The other kinds of charges people face. It makes poverty a crime, and also profits from the incarceration of poor people, because of many vendors, companies depend on jails, depend on a number of people being kept in jail, detained. So everything from the phone system to the internet to everything, all those vendors are dependent on the incarceration of poor people. It labels and stigmatizes people as criminals rather than allowing them to grow and change, which is the approach that many other countries use. Another thing we've noticed quite a lot is it treats addiction and mental illness as crimes. And many people in the Boone County Jail are in there for drug possession, drug paraphernalia, or behaviors related to mental illness. We've seen this just in this recent case of in Rochester, New York, where that was tragically the man suffering from mental illness died in that case when the police were trying to apprehend him. But if he had been taken to jail, he would not have received the treatment that he needed. The jail just cannot do that. They have one social worker and one nurse, and that's for 225 people, and that they cannot receive. So we need alternatives to that. The Columbia Police Department is looking into having a co-responder system where people with mental health expertise would go out on some of these calls where somebody is sort of melting down and suffering. It also exacerbates the cycles of violence that are disproportionately affecting people of color. And that's something that white Colombians need to realize. And another thing we notice is that being in jail separates and damages families. Somebody might, while they're in jail, lose their job, even have their children taken into custody, lose their housing. All kinds of things can happen while somebody's in jail. That's why we want to get people out and into some kind of alternatives. Just paying the bail for somebody, for instance, who is without shelter or who has addiction or a mental illness, and then they're back out there. Our volunteers, we have a vested interest in wanting there to be places for those folks to go. And we run up against the limitations on our current system, because just setting people free sounds like a great idea, but they're not free from the things that often put them into the jail. So when we're dreaming about what the world we'd like to have, we are thinking, what if we made incarceration the exception and release the default? And I think that's somewhat what the Missouri Supreme Court had in mind, that incarceration would be for people who pose a danger. We've tried to make the case that failure to appear in court, which will get somebody reincarcerated, does not pose a danger to the public. But the courts can't think of, well, what else are we going to do if somebody fails to appear? They have trouble thinking, what else could we do? But it does not really pose, somebody who's failed to go to court is not really inherently a dangerous person. We could end cash bail, as other countries have done, and as some states have done, to at least some extent. What if we worked on some of the roots of racism, poverty, homelessness, lack of mental health services, and transformed our community? What if we supported restorative rather than punitive practices? Restorative meaning, what could people do to restore the situation where maybe they have done damage to another person or to property or something like that, stolen something. What if we supported families? Right now, if a family, for instance, is in public housing, and this is actually this is not a knock on our local housing authority, but it's actually a federal policy. If one person, like an 18-year-old in that family were arrested for a drug offense, the entire family could be put out. So other children in that family could be put out of those facilities. And of course, we know the difficulty of obtaining a job if you have to report that you have an offense on your record. What if we taught children alternatives to violence? And what if we taught about anti-racism and empathy with people who are poor instead of judgment? What if we provided that mental health, substance abuse, and other services that people need to get on their feet? Some of our clients are looking for jobs, and we found out recently working with one of them that they needed a state ID, their social security card, things that in the process of being unsheltered, they have lost track of. And so trying to get all that stuff together, the process of getting a state ID, we finally found out how that works. It wasn't as hard as we thought, but those are the things that people need to get back on their feet, or in their feet in the first place. And what if we built a sustainable economy with affordable housing and a living wage? Those are the things we dream about, and that would put us out of business, and we hope that it happens. I'm almost getting to the end here, and then I'll address questions. Donations, I can't let this pass without making a plea. We do accept contributions by mail or online. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit, and the donations are tax deductible. And you can get a hold of us. I'll leave this up for a little bit. We have an email that you can send us a message if you need more info, or you want to volunteer, or just have a question. We're also on the Race Matters Friends website. There's a section for the Bail Fund, and that's just racemattersfriends.com. You can also like us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, RMF Community Bail Fund, and you can actually send us a Facebook message on there for the same reasons if you want to volunteer or have a question. And then you can call us, although that number is also the number that people from the jail call. So your call will go in the mix, but we do it there. You can leave a voicemail, and we will address that. Our volunteers will see that as well, and try to get back to you. We don't have a way to have a separate phone line for other kinds of queries, so that's our main number at this point. So I believe that's the end. Yes, it is.
Thank you so much, Peggy.
So I will stop sharing, and then we can address questions.
Thank you so much, Peggy. That was very informative. You actually addressed the first question early on about the new Missouri Supreme Court rule and how that affected and didn't affect the bail bond. The second question that came up was, what are the biggest barriers to expanding the capacity of Race Matters Friends community, well, the whole organization, and for the Community Bail Fund, so it can do what it would like to do in the community?
Well, we operate on two sources of energy. One is money and one is people. So we we always do need donations. We will watch for us on Como Gives in December. We are part of Como Gives, and we try to do fairly well with that. But even if we had $1 million, if we didn't have our wonderful volunteers to answer the phones and go to the jail and do some of this research, I think we're a long way from, somebody sent me a Facebook message, can you hire a staff? I mean, no, at this point we have about $24,000 in the bank. So, and if a lot of $2,000 bails came in, that wouldn't last very long. So we're not in a position at this point to pay anybody to work. And we have very low overhead, obviously. You know, we buy stationery or cards, thank you cards, very, very small expenses outside of the bail. So that
In relation,
things we need.
in relation to donations, we have someone who would like to know the mailing address for sending in donations.
And I should have put that on that last slide. I'm not sure why I didn't, because we do check the mailbox regularly, and I think Lauren put it in the chat. It's Post Office Box 7972. That's 7972, Columbia, Missouri 65205. And so if you don't like to do online PayPal and all that, we check our mailbox regularly, and that's where we also receive our bail refunds. So we're always anxious to check that mailbox and see what came in to replenish our funds.
Great. So another question, has your group applied to the United Way for continued funding?
No, we have not. And maybe we should look into what our chances would be in that case, because we're not, most of the groups that receive United Way funding are large enough to have staff, people who can write applications and those kinds of things. And we're kind of just going day to day. We would have to really make a leap to be in the queue for United Way with all the other social service agencies that depend on them. But maybe it's worth looking into.
And maybe if there's someone out there who's, if there's someone out there who has experience in making those applications and can help move the community bail fund in that direction, they could contact you or Race Matters,
Yes,
help out.
absolutely.
And I also see a note that when you gave out the address for mailing in donations, that the zip code is actually 65203, and you might have said 65205.
No, it's 65205.
Okay.
It's 65205 because it's the main post office. They use that zip code for post office boxes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thanks. So we've taken that one. I had a question. Then I'll go back to see if we have more chat questions. I know that Boone County, you were talking about mental illness and drug addiction. And I know that Boone County was one of the first counties under the leadership of Chris Carpenter to establish a mental health court.
Yes.
So how is that going, and how does that interact with the bail fund, or not interact with it?
Well, it often depends on the person's attorney advocating for a referral there, that they need something different. But yes, Boone County and actually the Boone County Commission have made some strides toward at least envisioning alternatives for people who are released from either prison or jail, some kind of transition into mental health services or addiction services. So I think that maybe the pandemic has set us back some, but there are things in the works. And Janet Thompson convened a big meeting last fall on this, and I think that's going to revive once we get through this period. I have great hopes for the co-responder program too, if they can make referrals to places.
It looks like we have some more questions coming in. Oh, okay. Can you work in pairs to go bail someone out?
Absolutely. And especially when people are first beginning, they don't go out there by themselves. Other people have gotten used to it and they're fine, but also we try to tell people to let us know if they do not feel comfortable in this period having somebody in their car, to see if we can possibly arrange some alternative to that or some other driver. But yes, I think pairs, and if we had people sign up together to be our partners of the day, that would be fantastic, because I always find that I forget something. I forget some procedure or something, and having another person there helps jog your memory. So, and just feel more comfortable.
Thanks, great. Another question. Could you tell us about an outcome of one of your cases?
Well, yes, we have had a lot of, actually, we haven't been specifically keeping data on this, but we still have contacts from people that we've bailed out who are still out and have not been re-arrested, and like to keep us informed of what's going on with them. Because our cases are so slow, a lot of people are still in the process. But knowing they have sometimes they just call our number and say, I just want to let you know what's going on with me. I'm back at work, or I found a department or something like that, because they know somebody has been interested. We have our, maybe we should start keeping track of everybody in that regard, because we often do lose track of somebody once their case is completed and we've received our refund. We will have our I don't want to call them defeats, but we will have people who get rearrested or convicted and sent to the Department of Corrections. We'll have those things too. But while people are out before trial, they have opportunities to do other things, and we hope that they do.
So following up on that question, another question we have is, do you keep statistics regarding outcomes? For example, what proportion of people you bail out do or do not appear for their court date? What proportion of cases are resolved within 6 months? How many people are able to retain their jobs and or children due to your work?
Yeah, we have statistics on those first things, definitely. We track every case and we know which ones we forfeited. That means that there was a failure to appear. So we have had our losses from that. So yes, we do. I couldn't give it to you off the top of my head. It's not a large number, but because I think people, once they know us, they feel a sort of commitment to get to court. But once in a while, somebody will, you know, just kind of disappear, fall off our radar. We don't know how to reach them. So, but we do keep, yes, we keep records on everybody.
Okay, another question. How do people without computers or phones go to court these days?
Right now, that's a good question, because the court has been operating by Zoom if possible, if somebody can get on Zoom. But the court is also, the courthouse is now reopened so that people, if they are masked, can go down there for their hearings. So, because for a long period during our shutdown, nothing was happening. You know, no Zoom cases, no in-person cases. A lot of cases were delayed, continued. And then once things started gearing back up, there was, if somebody's in the jail has capacity to do the video processes. But if somebody's been bailed or bonded out, and they say, well, your thing is going to be on Zoom, that can pose a lot. You don't want to be in the library doing your court case on a publicly viewable computer. It's not very private. So people are doing phones, trying to use their phones. It is very difficult.
Okay, thank you. There's a comment or a suggestion. It says, I'd like to suggest you do some publicity on Paul Pepper and the David Lyle programs to recruit writers for grants and other volunteers. So
yes, I have been on Paul Pepper, and that about a year ago, and so maybe we'll see if he can invite us again.
David Lyle is on KFRU. So you might, that's always a good program. There's another comment that says over 95% of people released on surety bail bonds appear in court.
Yes.
So that's your experience too.
Yes, yes, it is. We don't have the capacity that the bail bond companies have for locating people, and sometimes they're really good at tracking down people because they obviously don't want to forfeit, and neither do we. We have gone, a friend of mine and I have gone to the extent of going to somebody's house or somebody's mother's house, we felt like we were, we didn't want to get into being Dog the Bounty Hunter or something like that. But we did go out and, you know, try to locate somebody. We don't try to do that much, but we do make every attempt to find a way to contact somebody. Facebook's pretty good. We found people on Facebook. So we will do the best we can. But yes, we find that it's a minority who fail to appear. And probably that's the bail bond company. They don't want to lose money. So that's probably their experience too.
And then we have another question that goes back to the Missouri Supreme Court ruling or order. It says, I don't really understand why the Missouri Supreme Court ruling has had so little impact. So do you have some insight, additional insight you want to share on that, if you have?
Well, I only know locally what has happened. We did see if the order more judges releasing people on their own recognizance at their first appearance. That is, if these are cases we just observed when we were down there with one of our clients. So they would say, you know, I'm going to let you out. Here are the conditions. You don't have to pay anything. I think that we might be seeing less of that, but we are keeping tabs on that since we haven't been going to court as much. But I think locally, our experience anyhow, is the failure to appear on the summons. About, we are looking at the jail data, and quite a large percentage of people are in there on FTA or failure to appear. That is, they're on for their first, maybe they got a summons in the first place, then they, or maybe they were bonded out, you know, or a family member got them out, and then they failed to appear. So there are a lot of people in the jail just based on that, but that the court might have let them out on their own recognizance and given them conditions, and they failed to follow the judge's order on those conditions. So we've tried to learn all the codes that appear so we know why somebody is back in jail.
Okay. I think we have, we have a couple more questions, but I think we only have time for maybe one more. And I know Marilyn McLeod wants to inform people about important coming up events. So the last one, I guess it's, oh, they're really only comments. They're not questions. One is, I've heard that people may have to wait online for hours for their hearing and have missed their hearing by going to sleep. It might make it easier for folks if sessions were shorter with a more specific time. You know, have any comment on that?
That is a huge problem, both online and in the court itself. I mean, when the court was in full operation, because the court times are set, say there'll be 40 people and their court time is set at 1:30 on Wednesday. They all show up at 1:30, but they might not have their name called until 3:30. So they might be sitting there, and we have, if I'm down there with one of our folks, I can kind of make sure they don't fall asleep, but because it is kind of tedious. But we have seen people removed from the courtroom if they've fallen asleep, or, you know, told, you know, wake up or you're not going to be heard today. So it is a concern. They don't know exactly when somebody's going to be called. So they just set an initial time, and then first they tape the people in the jail on video, so that can take a while. And then they start with the people who have attorneys, either public defenders or private attorneys. So they get to go next because the attorneys don't want to hang around all afternoon. So last will be the people who don't have a public defender or an attorney, and those are often our people that have waited all that time for their name to be called. I don't know the way around it, but it is a problem.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, our time is ended. Thank you so much for sharing all that information, and I want to remind people to contact racemattersfriends.com to donate or to volunteer. And I also want to mention, I've seen people on Facebook do birthday fundraisers. I know I've donated to some for Race Matters, so that's another way that people can help contribute to the Community Bail Fund. And with that, thank you, Peggy Placer. I want to give the floor to Marilyn McLeod, the League of Women Voters President, for a few announcements.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Peggy. That was excellent. And thank you, Barbara. That was excellent. Learned a lot. Great questions, too. Coming up, we know there's an election in November, and the League of Women Voters and the library are partnering on a series of candidate and ballot issue forums. I won't give you all the dates here, but the library will be promoting that on their website, as will the League of Women Voters. They will all be on Zoom. So one of the benefits that ironically has happened by using Zoom is that these sessions are recorded. And therefore, if you don't get to hear them live, you can get to watch the video. So that is what we are really pleased to be able to do. So at that, I thank you all for attending. We had nice attendance here today, and thank you to the library for your assistance and sponsorship.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good day. Stay healthy.